Okay, we're going to start. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the April meeting of the Capital Program Oversight Committee. I'd like to make brief comments before public comments. First, a word about the committee's mission. This committee does not vote on MTA contracts or procurement. In fact, this committee votes infrequently. Rather, this group is intended to oversee capital projects, their delivery and execution, and success or failure, and suggest reforms. There is no more critically required mission at the MTA than this one right now. I want to welcome our new colleagues on this committee, Sarah Feinberg, Michael Linton, and David Mack, who have a rare combination of private sector, government, technology, and real estate expertise at the highest levels. Recently, Governor Cuomo coined a phrase, the transportation industrial complex, to describe the dualistic nature of many transportation vendors in design, construction, engineering, and related firms. The governor's phrase accurately describes the market in which the MTA lives. In rail cars, there are two large providers. In PTC for commuter rail, two large providers. In CBTC, two large providers. In construction and installation, few providers with relevant experience, some with solid track records of success, others not so much. In part, our agency is to account for contracting and project delivery difficulty. The MTA sometimes is a difficult customer. We pay slowly, forcing vendors to be involuntary financiers. We require customization beyond what our national and global peers demand, and subject potential vendors to extended and complex pre-qualification processes to be eligible to be bid on our work. Long Island Railroad and Metro North, similar operations in many ways, in large part located in the same region, have different requirements for products both use. In large part, a small number of suppliers with limited competition exercises pricing power, and they feel protected from normal market forces by their near monopoly position, and what economists call rent-seeking, which occurs around the world. Projects including rail cars and signaling have each become larger and more complicated, requiring exquisite levels of cooperation among multiple parties in different states and regions, creating opportunity for miscommunication and important deliverables falling through the cracks, exacerbated by the wonders of technology, which require great precision with the promise of even larger benefits in return, but the possibility of endless frustration and cost overruns to both agency and our customers. Earlier today in the Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committee meeting, you heard about an appalling industrial performance by a large, near $100 billion euro market cap multinational company, delaying a critical federally mandated safety program. These situations are unacceptable, and this committee will be seeking to fulfill its mission of overseeing major capital projects more robustly and demanding excellent performance from both our vendors and our own project teams. So what to do? First, the MTA must become a smarter and more efficient builder, operator, and buyer. Progress has been made toward this goal. Much more demands to be done. That progress with respect to construction was led by former Commissioner Reckler and Jan Lieber. You'll hear updates today on that work this board cycle, and I believe evidence of that work in this meeting. And I look forward to hearing about how our projects will continue to incorporate and execute on these principles in the months to come as well. We also need to be more flexible in how we procure and must certify new providers, including disruptors, in every part of our operation. Second, we must be more muscular with vendors. One of the consequences of the military-industrial complex General Eisenhower named in the 1950s was a cozy familiarity between the military and large defense contractors, with retired military personnel ending up across negotiating tables from former colleagues. That's the same, unsurprisingly, happens sometimes in the transportation industrial complex. Third, the recently enacted state budget, in addition to the epic achievement of the governor in getting authorization for central business district tolling, also required the MTA to execute capital projects above $25 million as design-build projects unless exempted by the state budget director. Further, law requires that a major construction review unit comprised of external and internal experts to review all large-scale projects. In addition, the new statute importantly provides that MTA contractors which deliver projects more than 10% late or over budget would be subject to debarment, a very consequential action, especially for large publicly traded companies who have to report to the SEC or the SEC equivalent in their home countries, and the possibility of cascading debarments in other jurisdictions. Lastly, the MTA can more effectively leverage outside expertise to bring innovation and efficiencies into the way we build, especially through the use of private capital. The first subway lines were constructed over 100 years ago. The Lexington Avenue line, mere feet from the front door at 2 Broadway, was built by an investor group led by August Belmont for the purpose largely to enhance the value of his real estate in the northern parts of the city. Public-private partnerships have been used to great effect in Canada, Australia, the UK, Chile, and to a lesser extent in the States. The Port Authority has executed successful public-private partnerships with what I understand to be great success at LaGuardia Airport and the Goethals Bridge. Those transactions importantly enjoyed support from organized labor and the MWBE community. To be clear, P3s are not a panacea. On some deals they don't fit, and some small percentage of them fail. But when executed well, they can be very effective. I want the MTA to explore the use of private capital where it makes sense. The higher cost of equity capital can be more than offset by private sector innovation and transfer to well-capitalized parties of schedule and budget risk. The MTA has already hired able public-private partnership outside counsel, and I expect we'll be exploring P3s at the MTA. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 public speakers. The first is Jason Pinheiro, who will be followed by Omar Vera.
Good afternoon, Chairman Pat Foy and Ronnie Hakam. Chairman Pat Foy, I totally agree with your statement 100% full extent. And applying to that, we should apply the lenses that we learned when we opened the first phase of 2nd Avenue subway. That I raised the red flag 6 months before Governor Andrew Mark Cuomo opened the 3 new stations forcibly, causing delays on testing and other important components for the first phase of 2nd Avenue. And I hope that on phase 2, under the leadership of Janet Lieber, we won't have this relapse on failure. And we hope seeing that on East Side Access, and I hope that we will get a huge surprise once it opens. And the same for Penn Access and the other capital construction projects. So I want to end wishing Chairman Pat Foy the best of luck, and we're gonna be here as we always do, doing the good thing, providing feedback to you guys to be the world-class agency that we should be.
Thank you, Ms. Pinheiro. The next speaker is Omar Vera.
Good afternoon. MTA CPOC meeting. First of all, let me just welcome Chairman Foy, Chairman CEO Foy. The first head since Chairman Prendergast stepped down in January of 17. High hopes for you to follow through with Chairman Prendergast had set through, both with 2nd Avenue, with other projects, and of course, one of his greatest works, restoring the W train, which is running better than ever. It's been running for over 2.5 years now. But what we're waiting for now is phase 2 of 2nd Avenue. Phase 2 must become a reality. And let's see if we can do this in less than a decade. You may disagree or have various opinions on this, but in the past, it used to only take a few years to construct a new subway line. Now it's basically taking, I don't know, forever. And then, was it the cost? Is it technology? Is it, I don't know. But in any case, we can be great. And we can, and remember the state's motto, Excelsior, ever upward. We must always strive to be, greater than before. And with that, I shall yield the balance of my time, and as for the new board members, welcome aboard. I shall visit here again soon. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. That concludes public comments.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of this CPOC March 25th, 2019? Second. Terrific. All in favor? Aye. Good. So, Michael, put me down as abstaining. I think the minutes are fine. I wasn't here. I'm not going to vote for them. Thanks. Tom?
Okay, as far as work plan, there is one change to the work plan. The update to the MWDBE participation, originally scheduled for this month, will instead be presented at May CPOC. This is so that the data reflects the entire New York State fiscal year, which ended on March 31st.
Good. Jano, over to you.
We're starting with East Side Access.
Good.
And I have to start out by apologizing in advance to the members of the board who sat through the shorter version of this presentation earlier, but I am going to try to be mindful of your time as well. Okay, well, this is a year ago, and it was at this meeting a year ago. I came to you and reported that, as requested by the board, we'd taken a hard look at the project from a budget and schedule standpoint. The results of that review were not good. The issues that had plagued the budget for years were again threatening to push out the schedule and explode the budget. Specifically, and to provide a contrast with how far we've come, at Harold Interlocking, as I always say, the busiest passenger rail intersection in America, progress was stalled, mostly due to Amtrak's inability or unwillingness to provide personnel required for much of that work to take place. Construction and fit out of the new concourse below Grand Central was behind, owing in large part to serious errors and deficiencies in the design drawings. That is a problem that weighs largely on the MTA, and it is of 20 years vintage. It's a very old problem, but with very big consequences. Vital aspects of the complicated 29 separate systems work, 30,000 separate devices involved in that, was stuck, and as a result, testing was not moving forward as it should. And the lack of productivity and all these schedule delays combined were translating into increased costs. We had to stop the bleeding and to make some tough decisions. So after a review and after discussion with the board, we recommended that we recommit to the December 2022 revenue service date, which was under pressure, but which I believe then and I believe now is accomplishable. And we had to acknowledge the cost of some of the problems that I've enumerated. The plan was met with overall a very positive response from opinion leaders on Long Island. Our new commissioner, Mr. Law, was very much part of our effort to socialize the information about what this project is, why it's significant, and what it will accomplish. So quickly today, I'm going to play for you a video of the progress in photograph with dates before and after dates, so you can date it. So in order, as I discussed this morning, we made significant organizational changes to support the schedule, and we detailed the schedule. I cannot emphasize how important this is. We went from a 15,000 activity schedule to a 57,000 activity schedule. Allows us to really identify all of the issues that could derail the project, however small. So that is a significant step forward. And I talked to you a little bit about the organizational changes we made, but the results have been significant. We have a 70% reduction in the time it takes to resolve and execute change orders. The backlog of change orders was 500 in number that I described last year is down, reduced by 91%. And the hundreds of submittals that were waiting for review by our team and by our design team for more than 30 days. Outdated submittals have been reduced by 81%.
Colleagues, that's an incredible achievement.
Yeah. Another area of success, and I have to give credit to Amtrak, because we were very clear with you and with the public that Amtrak's failure to support this project, even though we're paying for every nickel of their time and their workforce, was a serious detriment to the schedule. And we called it out, and we talked to them about it, and they have stepped up. It's not perfect, but significant improvements been made. And the results are dramatic. In Harold, we went, as a result of the increased support, not just from Amtrak, but from Long Island Railroad, which has been a stellar partner in this. We did accomplish last year $225 million of construction work, which was a 35% increase on the previous average over the prior years. And just two other indicators: 14 track switches installed, 5 signal huts cut over. This is all work at 5 times the pace of the prior 4 years. And as I said, we awarded the last heavy civil contract, the BC Tunnel Approach, to Skanska, and they were able to mobilize early because our team, together with the Amtrak and Long Island teams, has got their act together. I need to stop here and acknowledge somebody who's been responsible for all of this progress in Harold, and that's Mike Kalita. Mike is an extraordinary professional. The complexity of this work in Harold and the ballet and the choreography of 800 to 900 trains a day and trying to get significant work done in that environment has been an extraordinary challenge. He hasn't, as we said, always had 100% cooperation from some of the agencies that control access and the impact on his schedule, but he's worked it through. And under Mike's leadership, we created a regional outage schedule, which has really never been done before this systematically, so that all of the work east of the Hudson is coordinated with all the agencies: Long Island Railroad, ourselves, Amtrak, the work in Moynihan, and in Related's Hudson Yards development. It all has been factored in. Mike is retiring, and I just need to acknowledge his leadership and thank him for everything we've accomplished. Mike? Please.
So, Amtrak has often stated their intention to run a lot more trains on the Northeast Corridor. They tried to bill us for the cost of the Pelham Bridge replacement and part of Harold, which the governor rightly said no to. Have they given you any idea when they intend to increase this frequency? I assume it would be after East Side Access?
Yeah, excuse me, it must be after East Side Access. And really, honestly, the work on the East River tunnels, which is a significant undertaking that they control, yes, is the other bottleneck, yes, to the increases in the level of service that we all want through Harold.
So it's safe to say that prior to that, there's not going to be an increase?
No,
in frequency?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And the question of, how do they have equipment? Do they have the staff to support additional frequency and so on? Open question. But the first thing is East River tunnels. Risk. There are still risks. We need Amtrak's improvement to continue. We have tens of thousands of system tests. That's why Rob Troop is, we got a systems professional running this whole job. That's a major challenge, the systems testing. And overall, we still have the mega challenge of the management coordination of all of these contractors in a complex work environment. And finally, as I reported to the board last month, the introduction of the JPMC, JP Morgan Chase structure, which is coming down through the East Side Access Concourse and also through the Metro North Grand Central train shed, is an additional wrinkle. We have worked very successfully with them to manage that, but it is an additional aspect that we have to overcome and deal with. Public engagement. With the improvements in the past years, we've really, I think, changed, upgraded, but changed in kind our communications and outreach. We've been aggressive in outreaching to civic leaders with regular updates and countless tours of East Side Access. Mr. Law talked about it this morning. We've had county executives Balone and Curran visit with their staff. We had the Right Track Coalition for Long Island. This is the group was so powerfully effective in supporting the effort to get a third track going. They've become active in communicating about the project. And we've used this website we created, which we call amodernli.com, which tracks all 100 projects that are ongoing on Long Island to push out news about this project as well as many, many others. People are seeing, you know, as Commissioner Mitzker said this morning, when you see this project, it takes your breath away. Nobody has opened an 8-track railroad terminal in the United States since the early 50s. This is a historic effort. It obviously has a history of challenges and problems, but let us not miss the punchline, which is we're moving towards opening a historic mega facility. So I want to invite you again to come, and we will set up some times for board members to see it. Finally, I just want to emphasize something that kind of goes to what Pat said, the chairman said at the outset, which is we are taking the lessons of some of the projects that had challenges, Second Avenue Phase 1, East Side Access in the past, and also learning from projects that are going great, like Third Track, about what we do. We're saying no to scope creep. We are not engaging any discretionary design changes. We've cut back on the red tape, which is how we've accomplished those metrics that I described to you. And we're learning how to better execute all of these projects so that we can deliver for the people of Long Island. Highlights of the construction progress so far, there's so many, I'm just going to touch on a couple. We completed substantial completion of the 57D Harold Track contract. Today, we are hitting substantial completion for 2 other major contracts, the so-called 006 contract and the CM32 contract. I won't go into the details, but these are 250 and roughly $300 million and $200+ million contracts themselves. So we are closing out contracts and hitting milestones on all of the various contracts, so that we're down to just the systems testing and the work in the concourse and a little work in Harold. At this point, well, I got one other thing to discuss, which is we're also doing, I think, a better job, although not perfect, of tracking our progress in different areas. You can see how we're monitoring progress, in particular in the systems area. We've had some challenges in 2 areas, which is the facilities power and the tunnel ventilation. That's principally linked to our ability to get an approval from Con Ed for particular systems configuration issues. We're confident that with the new schedule that we've signed up with the contractor, which you approved at the Long Island Railroad Committee meeting this morning, that we will move forward those areas of systems testing that are a little bit lagging, but they are where they are right now. This is just being a little bit redundant to what I've already explained to you. So these are key performance indicators. You see the submittals backlog, the open change order trend, which is what it is. We are holding to the spending plans, which is used as a surrogate for project progress in many cases. How much you spend, indicative of how much work is getting done. So we're holding to that. Cost contingency is actually good. Here it looks like contingency has dipped below remaining work, and that's again because some of the work that we've done so far has not cost as much as it was scheduled to cost. So we're actually in a good position in the relationship between cost contingency and remaining work. And schedule contingency, as you can see, is outpacing remaining work, so that's where you want to be. Finally, the old trend with Amtrak, I'm not going to get into it. It's moved in the right direction. We still have a little way to go, and I would just emphasize, sort of by way of what Pat said again at the outset, one of the things we've done to solve this problem is we've taken work that Amtrak used to insist that they do, and we're taking it for ourselves. We're doing a design-build contract with our own contractors. We were going to pay for it if Amtrak was going to do it. We'd rather have control of the work, and we've done that with some of the electric traction power work. Rob, can you comment on the 90-day look ahead?
Certainly. Thank you, Jana. So looking ahead over the next 90 days, we will energize 2 additional facility power substations, and these will provide the necessary power that allows the system testing to move forward. Factory acceptance testing of the tunnel SCADA is critical to the fire and life safety system, and it's also an important component of what is the integrated incremental systems testing. As you saw in the video montage,
Hey, Rob, just tell folks what SCADA is.
I'm sorry. So the SCADA is it's a data information back and forth that provides information to control systems that are out in the field and provides it back into the control center. So like a traction power substation, you can control the breakers. A signal system, you can control the signal networks through the SCADA system. And as you saw in the video montage, the installation of tracks and switches in the midday storage yard has now commenced. So as we presented at the committee meetings this morning, we have negotiated, after a year, modifications with the CS-179 systems and the CM-014B concourse contractors. And this takes care of a variety of issues, most importantly, the agreement on the incremental systems testing approach. And the approval of these modifications at the board meeting Wednesday provides for a clear path forward to help ensure that we meet that 2022 service date. For the issues identified here, the board has approved the modifications that will address the start of the Phase 3 incremental systems testing. And, you know, moving this prioritized mods forward is a really good example of what the PMO, the program management oversight, brings to the project. You know, when we prioritize the work that is critical, we're able to execute on those priorities in a timely fashion and reduce the risk, and also, most importantly, maintain schedule. Delays to the factory acceptance testing of the backbone communication system risks a cascading set of delays to the multiple discrete systems that ride on this backbone, like the SCADA system. And we are working very, very closely with the contractor to mitigate these issues. Now, what are some examples of this mitigation? So we're close coordination and oversight of Securitas, which is the contractor systems integrator. And this includes over-the-shoulder reviews, actually sitting in their office, going over, sitting with them while they provide submittals, being able to work cooperatively with them and providing timely information. And what this does is this allows the project to move forward. But most importantly, I'm requiring of the entire project team that we move more quickly, not just Securitas, but also the East Side Access Project team, that we work more quickly to resolve these issues.
And Rob, Securitas is a sub of who?
Securitas is a sub of a sub, actually, yeah. So TPC is the prime, 5-star is a sub to them, and then Securitas is their systems integrator. That's correct. So, you know, on the traction power, which is the CS-084, this is the power that provides electricity to the trains. While we have addressed the manufacturing issues which had occurred earlier and equipment is being delivered, we must prioritize those locations where the equipment goes into, and a lot of that includes water mitigation. Delivery of the equipment is also being coordinated with other contractors. Remember, we're working in a very small space. It requires close coordination with other contractors who are moving in and out. And again, this is where the PMO helps us move work forward. Tunnel B and C approach, again, this is a result of the gentleman behind me, Mike Kalita, which Jano has talked about. And I do want to extend my thanks to our partners at Long Island Railroad and Amtrak. for their support, which has allowed this work in Harold to work ahead of schedule and allowing award, NTP, and most importantly, the work to commence. We have already commenced the work here a little bit ahead of schedule. So in the coming months and years, I do hope to see the status of this issue change to green. However, the realities of the environment that we're working in require diligence and planning from multiple partners. So if we'll not turn to green, I do want to stress that we must keep this issue from turning to red. MTACC's efforts in taking ownership of the regional construction schedule, which Jano had mentioned, and to manage those resources will make sure that all MTA projects are supported. MTA's work on that regional schedule has allowed Amtrak to develop a hiring plan specifically for ET resources, and we hope that that will lead to providing additional personnel once they are qualified. Overall, this is the risk that has to be managed closely, and this is with all construction projects that occur on a live operating railroad. Recognizing that this is a risk to the project, 270 Park, and a complication that was not necessarily envisioned, it is nonetheless a story of the positive impact that ESA is already having on the region. We have some very talented designers on JP Chase and the ESA team who have worked extremely hard to craft a memorandum of understanding and a design that is based on two unbending principles. First, that we will not work in any way that will impact or delay the revenue service date for ESA, and two, that the risk will no way impact the project budget. The MOU between JP Chase and the MTA has been approved by the board.
And I'll just add a note that we've actually advanced it. We now are exchanging drafts of the construction agreement, which formalizes the principles in the MOU, and they've delivered us a much more developed design. So this thing is going forward quickly.
So as we approach revenue service, Long Island Railroad operational readiness and the rail activation plan, in other words, what it takes for Long Island Railroad to get ready to run service, will become a more significant area of focus. As of a few weeks ago, the LIRR now fully owns and has responsibility for the operational readiness and asset management teams, which had currently resided with ESA. There's a lot of elements to this, and among those are the operational readiness. It's things such as simply the opening day service plan, the maintenance and facility service planning, systems acceptance, public information and communications, the hiring and training of the multiple crafts and disciplines which require Long Island Railroad to run the service. And I am pleased to report that's on an increasingly positive track, but that must be maintained and be looked at very, very closely. But I guarantee you that Long Island Railroad is committed to providing a world-class passenger experiences starting on day one of service to GCT, and executing a highly developed operational readiness plan helps to ensure that this is achieved. Thank you.
That's our report.
Good, thanks, Rod. IEC?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Darlene Rivera with the IEC. The IEC report begins on page 38 of your CPOC books. The cost agreements for the systems and Manhattan Concourse fall within the projected contingencies established in the April 2018 plan. The program schedule includes the revised milestones captured in these agreements and maintains a 10-month program contingency. The early completion of systems testing relies upon a compressed 16-month incremental testing duration, which will be a challenge for a project of this scope and complexity. Additional resources and work shifts, as well as enhanced coordination, are essential to progress the work given the increased amount of concurrent testing activities planned. A resource-loaded schedule is required to further assess the risks associated with systems testing and validate the program contingency remaining to the December 22 revenue service date. The IEC recommends the following. The project team and the systems contractor must fill key positions, such as the lead system integrator and systems technical manager, as soon as possible to effectively progress the incremental testing work. This concludes the IEC report.
Can I ask a question?
Please, sir.
This is just my second board meeting, so it's probably helpful for others because we've got other new members here too. But apologize if I'm naive. Can you explain to me what it is the IEC does, and when you insert yourself into the process, and how you differ, how the work that you're doing differs from the work that the internal MTA teams are doing?
Sure. Through the IEC's monitoring activities and analysis, the IEC has been successful in identifying issues that need additional focus and have significant cost and schedule implications. By providing recommendations and bringing this to the attention of upper management, we're further able to review the risks associated, and a lot of the risks associated, and we've discussed with the project on a monthly and even weekly basis, appear in the project's presentation to CPOC. A couple of these appear, the change order process issue that Jano has successfully done. We brought that issue quite a while back and kept bringing it up until it received the attention it needed so that they could successfully mitigate it, as well as the traction power issues, and also predecessor activities to IST. We also provide independent analysis from our systems experts. We provided an IST duration analysis, as well as provided comments to their schedule for this incremental system testing, where we identified several system errors and worked with the project controls team to correct them.
But you're doing that work after the internal MTA teams are doing that work, right? You're coming in
I would say
after
the risks being identified we do together, because we have monthly risk meetings with the project, and then we can have additional meetings with higher level management as well to bring these issues to light. And the project develops the mitigations. We provide input, we provide our expertise to help them. We have several experts on staff.
Okay. It seems like we have multiple entities doing the same work. So maybe I don't understand the role, and I just need a briefing, and I don't have to take up the time here to understand it.
So another way to think of the question, another way sort of think of the question is, what value is the IEC provided on a particular project, which is a question I'm going to ask on the next one. And I think your question is a good one. And it's especially good, I think, in light of the terrific experience we had on the L train with the contributions pro bono, and that's good, by the deans from Columbia and Cornell and their colleagues. And we announced last week, and it's been reported, right, the amount of linear feet of bench wall that has to be demolished is now 1% of the original estimate. The deans thought we could get to 40% reduction, which itself was extraordinary. And I think whether it's the IEC or other external parties looking at it, the question is, what value is provided. But I think your question is a fair one. Any other questions? And if not, we'll move on to Tim. And Tim, tell us who you are and tell us about 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2, if you would.
Tim Gianfrancesco, Senior Vice President for 2nd Avenue.
Mike.
Great. Tim Gianfrancesco, I'm in charge of 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2. I actually started here, I think this month actually is my 30th anniversary. I started here as an intern in 1989, so thanks. I was on Phase 1, saw that Phase 1 open back in the end of 2016, and I bring a lot of lessons learned from Phase 1 over into 2nd Avenue Phase 2. So a reminder of the scope for Phase 2. Phase 2 2nd Avenue Subway extends queue service 3 stations north of 96th Street, which was the north station at the end of Phase 1. We have new stations at 106th Street, 116th Street, and at 125th Street, we have direct passenger connections to the 4, 5, and 6 Lexington Avenue line, and then we'll also have an entrance close to the Metro North Viaduct where we'll pick up passengers coming off of Metro North. So I want to talk about our federal funding and our application for federal funds. But I'd like to say, the future of this project lays in Washington. We are looking for a substantial amount of federal funding for this project, similar to what we had on phase 1. So roughly around 33% or a third of the project cost, we've asked for federal grants. We started with a $6 billion cost when we entered into project development approximately 2 years ago. And we developed that cost as a placeholder from looking at what phase 1 cost us, and then applying, since we had similar construction, similar scope of work, applying escalation to that value, and we came up with a starting point of $6 billion. Right now, based on our preliminary engineering and some cost pressures and some substantial cost containment efforts, the project is somewhere in the middle between $5.5 to $6 billion. But we know we're not done with cost containment. We have a long way to go with cost containment, and we want to get that cost down further. We're carrying a goal of a federal funding agreement as early as the end of 2020. We've completed our supplemental environmental assessment, and we've received the finding of no significant impact this past November. And we've submitted documents to the FTA to support the FTA's risk assessment and their assessment of our readiness to enter into next phase of engineering. We're thankful for the strong support from our local New York delegation and congressional representatives, especially Congressman Espaillat, who's dedicated to seeing this project get the federal funding it needs so that we can move forward into construction. Since we restarted design in 2017, we've completed a preliminary engineering, and we're finishing up the design of an advanced works package and an early utility package. We're now focused on incorporating ideas from peer reviews from international experts, our value engineering efforts, as well as engaging with the academic review panel. We want to make this project less expensive, but just as effective. Now to some of the good stuff. One of the major cost containment ideas that we have and that we've advanced during preliminary engineering is the reuse of the existing tunnel section that was constructed in the 1970s for the 116th Street station. What you see there is a picture. On the left-hand side was the original preliminary engineering concept for the 116th Street station. Basically, is 5 blocks shown in pink are 5 blocks of excavation and demolition of the existing structure. What you see on the right-hand side is the new concept that we've developed and that we will develop further in preliminary engineering, where we can maintain and reuse most of the existing box, and those areas or pockets of where you see in pink are the areas where we connect into the box with new entrances and new ancillary structures. We were able to do this because back in the 1970s, when they constructed that existing box, they were anticipating being able to inspect the trains along the route. So right where they installed an inspection track in the middle of the 2 existing tunnels, or the 2 running tunnels, we figured that we can fit an island platform in that spot. Since we don't inspect the trains on the right-of-way anymore, we can fit an island platform right there and do some reframing. We will have some columns within the station, which is a departure from some of the previous 2nd Avenue standards. But we will be able to minimize the excavation, which is probably the most expensive activity that we do when we build these new tunnels and these new structures. Excavating.
So, Tim, I'm just curious, great stuff. How much do you estimate the cost savings to the MTA from these improvements or a new approach?
Hundreds of millions. This particular issue, we believe, is in the area of $500 million.
And that's on top of the additional reduction in scope you've already achieved?
Yes, there's been reductions. There's also been pressures as codes change, as details change. The project is always fluctuating a little bit up and down. So this is something that was not considered in the original cost of the project, these savings.
I'm just curious, last question. What's your ballpark estimate as to the savings to the MTA from using the existing tunnel and the other things you've done?
Close to $1 billion.
It's pretty good. Thank you.
And we're at this stage when I've talked to Andy Byford, and what we really want to do is to put all of the transit discipline professionals and the team together to really hack away at scope and try to bring the cost down further. You know, this is consistent with the cost containment principles of we're trying to simplify, decustomize, use off the shelf, and just generally reduce scope. So this is the moment, while we're waiting for the federal funds, hopefully to develop to do that.
Tim, did the 1970s version of this tunnel always envision an island platform at 116th Street?
The 1970s version didn't envision a station at 116th Street.
At all?
At all.
They were going to bypass an important crosstown street like 116th Street?
They were going to bypass. It was in 2004 when we restarted the design and the concept of Second Avenue subway that we identified a station at 116.
And the last question is, do today's and future car types, will they allow for the same clearances as what was allowed for in the 70s there?
Yes, absolutely. We meet all today's standards on the new design.
Thanks.
So the last slide I have is just another roll-up and an example of the savings that we've achieved at the 125th Street area. This is more of a general slide to show that we've addressed entrance designs, ancillary system designs, as well as the design of the cavern itself to, again, minimize the amount of excavation. And in particular here at 125th, this is all rock excavation. So it's probably the most expensive type of excavation we do on these projects. You could see that there's a substantial amount of excavation savings, almost 100,000 cubic yards. I mean, for frame of reference, that's over 10,000 truckloads of material. 6,500 cubic yards of concrete. Again, it's substantial savings, and that's how we achieve the hundreds of millions of dollars of savings here and ideas. But we're not done. We want to still get this project down to a more palatable and acceptable overall cost. That concludes my report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple remarks summarizing our observations on this program. First, the project has maintained its goal to complete the federal funding process by the fourth quarter of 2020. They've done that by completing the key submissions of required project development materials to the FDA last month, and by setting a schedule for completing a readiness review for starting engineering by mid-year. Secondly, the proposal that we just discussed to fully reuse the existing tunnel, I think, really demonstrates the project's commitment to an aggressive cost containment program. Those are my remarks.
What's the IEC's value added on this project over this kind of period of time since the last CPOC board meeting?
Good question. Certainly, we've had several points of influence. I think I'll start by saying that floor space is one of the more generally understood drivers of cost in this kind of instruction. And our observation of the development plans last June realized that a significant amount of space was being allocated for transit user group operations, maintenance, and support facilities. Back office, as in the common term in our business. We raised some questions, and then we finally recommended that be looked at again under a closer review for, in this particular case at 125th Street, we thought there were opportunities above ground for those sorts of facilities, or even at 96th Street, the existing terminal, once it becomes reconfigured as a line station instead of a terminal. And the project undertook some of those studies, and I think a lot of them have been done. We expect to look at the plans shortly and see exactly the changes that have been made and see whether there are any further opportunities to right-size the station.
So if I could just add one note, when Kent's talking about us trying to push space out of very expensive below-grade space that requires excavation to above grade, that's the ancillary buildings. And one of the things that I've introduced is that we want to take the ancillary buildings, which tend to, in Second Avenue Phase 1, have frequently ended up being these sort of dead face buildings with bad streetscape or no streetscape benefit, and actually build around them. So we worked with city planning to make sure that in the East Harlem rezoning, for those sites that have ancillary facilities or entrances on them, we have a higher height envelope to work with. And so hopefully there can be some positive development of retail, housing, or otherwise, hopefully contribute to the cost, but equally to the streetscape of the communities around.
Good. I applaud that. Eve.
Thank you, Eve Michelle, Senior Vice President for Penn Station Access. So, good afternoon. So the Penn Station Access is going to bring many benefits to the entire region. Among them is the ability for commuters to travel not only in and out of Manhattan, but an emphasis here is for passengers to travel up to Westchester as well as Connecticut. The new infrastructure will also boost the economy. We anticipate a lot of jobs as a result of this project, both in construction and after the project is done. We will also be able to access major medical and educational facilities, particularly at the Morris Park facility station. A little bit about the project, just to give you an overview. The 4 new stations are identified on this slide in green. You see Co-op City, Morris Park, Parkchester Van Nest, and Hunts Point. But in order to accommodate these stations, we'll need to add additional track. The red line you see there is the 6 miles of additional track that will be added as part of the project. And also included in this track are going to be a number of new interlockings, which will allow us to connect back to the original rail. Part of this project will necessitate additional power and signal work, all of which will be included in the project. So this is a sneak preview of what you're going to see. Here we have the Metro North train coming into the Co-op City station. Above you is the pedestrian overpass that customers will use. As we turn around here, a passenger arriving at the station will come and access the platforms. And if you look up, you'll get a little bit of a preview of what some of the artwork might look like in the station overpasses. This is an active Amtrak right-of-way. You're about to see a Acela come speeding down the right-of-way. And here we have our M8s coming to collect passengers. Our passengers from here will either go into New York City or, as mentioned, up to Connecticut and Westchester. So this is an exciting time for the project. We've actually had a lot of major accomplishments. We have signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Amtrak. This was hard won, but it has allowed Metro North permission to travel along the active Hellgate line, which is an Amtrak right-of-way. We've also gotten the MTA approval for the general engineering consultant contract. So we've started work with HNTB on this contract. We've issued them a notice to proceed on February 12th. We've also started having our key stakeholder kickoff meetings. We've met with Metro North, with Amtrak, and with Long Island Railroad. And also, we're starting the actual work. Survey work has started. It started on Friday. It's continued over the weekend. This is going to be survey work both on the right-of-way, also on the adjacent areas. As part of the survey work, we're actually using LiDAR equipment. This equipment is going to allow us to capture information that will be used and translated into the project documents. This will in turn feed the BIM, the 3D drafting, which will become part of the project components. A few words about the stakeholders. Key stakeholders, this project is being run, as you know, under the auspices of MTA Capital Construction. Our key stakeholder clearly is Amtrak because this is their right-of-way along the Hellgate line. Metro North is our client. They will be activating these 4 new stations in the Bronx for their customers. This is the first major expansion on the Metro North Railroad in many years. We also have freight as part of this railroad. CSX will be, currently operates at the Hunts Point Yard. They will continue to do so as the project progresses. And Long Island Railroad partners with us because as we enter into Harold, we'll be connecting to the third track so that we can go through into the East River tunnels to access Penn Station. So how are we going to do this? In order to drive this project, we're going to use an integrated project management team approach. Already each stakeholder has identified a central decision maker, and this is very critical so that we can get decisions made swiftly and accurately. We're also partnering with the discipline leaders, meaning the power, the track, and the signals people. Each have a discipline leader that is partnered up with HNTB, our engineering team. Amtrak has one. Metro North and Long Island Railroad also are supplying these discipline leaders. In order to speed up reviews, we are going to task HNTB with quality submissions. We are also going to co-locate staff so that we can get easy turnaround. And basically, we're going to do what we can with regular meetings. We're going to have over-the-shoulder reviews in order to expedite the design process.
Just to remind you, I mean, because submittal time turnaround was such a big deal, the volume is so great. You know, now we're dealing with an outside agency that reviews all the submittals, Amtrak. So we're trying to work with them to see if we can help them expedite their reviews by providing both the caliber of document and also the support that will enable them to do it, and this kind of over-the-shoulder dialogue, which cuts short the back and forth that frequently, you know, is part of the submittal review process.
Sorry, I thought I could get back to that slide. So in addition to the reviews and the integrated project management team, we're going to take advantage of some electronic project management opportunities. MTA has started to work with an A-Site program. This will allow life cycle tracking. We'll see some excellent dashboards and tracking techniques that we'll be utilizing. You'll see some of them on the third track. We intend to bring those into our project. But this A-Site program will be utilized on the Penn Station access. We'll actually be one of the first to use that approach. We also are going to be driving cost containment principles that have been talked about to the MTA board. In particular, we're going to do tight management of scope. This will allow us to drive schedule, but also to contain the costs as we move forward. We recognize that this project has many complexities. We're working with a new railroad. We're also within this high-speed right-of-way. And we are going to do this through the project design, build, project delivery system. And there are many benefits for us. We are going to be able to get early construction input from the construction community. We will enjoy some of the innovations that we can learn from them with the alternate technical concepts. And we're going to use this to drive schedule. We're also starting now with the RFQ. We're going to be preparing and issuing an RFQ at this early stage so that we can go out to the contractor community. And it's extremely important to us that we maximize competition for this project. In terms of the, we're already thinking ahead on how we're going to phase the construction itself. One of the key activities here is to minimize Amtrak's disruption as well as Long Island Railroad, since they're both on this active right-of-way. We're talking about track outages to accomplish that. We're also doing some modeling to see whether or not there are single tracking opportunities available as we move forward. Community outreach, sorry?
So one of the, in the opening of this particular project's pages, it mentions traction, power, catenary, and third rail. You're not going to install third rail for this route.
Yes, actually we are. And basically, as we enter into Harold, there is a phase break there. Amtrak travels along at 60 hertz, and then they transfer over to 25 hertz as they go through the East River Tunnel. The M8 equipment is not able to make that transition. The M8, however, does have a shoe with an overrunning capacity that needs a third rail. So that juncture, it's a mile-long juncture as you enter into Harold, will need to have a third rail to bridge that phase break.
So that would be the only section, obviously, of third rail.
That's correct.
Wow. All right, thanks.
And incidentally, that also will necessitate DC substations in order to facilitate the third rail.
Okay.
So a little bit about, yes?
Are there no plans to upgrade that 25 cycle section so it can be the same as everything else?
Well, Amtrak's equipment does allow both 60 hertz and 25 hertz, whereas the MA equipment does not. So I will have to defer a little bit on that question in terms of the M8 vehicles, and I don't know if my colleagues at Metro North would like to address that.
No, it dealt with just having the system to be the same all through.
Right.
Hi, Mike Schiffer, Vice President for Planning at Metro North. The issue is that Metro North's phase, which Amtrak can accept, for it to match, it would have to be changed for the entire New Haven line, or Amtrak would need to change for their entire corridor. And really, it's far more cost-effective just to build that small section of third rail to be able to accommodate.
Thank you, Mike. So a little bit about community outreach. Obviously, that's a key component of this project. It is to serve 4 very unique and different Bronx communities. Thus far, city planning has been sponsoring workshops that we have been actively participating in. We will be building the stations. However, how they are interfaced with the communities is of key importance, and these workshops are addressing that. Thus far, we have met with Morris Park, as well as Parkchester and Van Nest. Up in the next couple of months, we'll be dealing with Hunts Point and Co-op City. So we recognize that we have strong board support as well as community support on this. We've also had the support of the Bronx Borough President Office. That being said, we have many challenges ahead. Amtrak cooperation is clearly key among them. A challenge that we're facing right now is we're working on a design phase agreement that will allow us to continue our engineering work, and this is something that needs to be advanced at this time. We're also talking about securing funding. Implementation of the Central Business District Tolling Program will provide the additional monies for the project as we move forward into the 2024 plan. And also, in order to advance the procurement of the long lead items, which includes the interlockings, as well as to start construction, we will need to complete the environmental process.
Eve, just before you go on, Jano, I'd have one request. I think in the past, pre your arrival, the MTA and its agencies has been way too patient and forbearing with respect to Amtrak disappointments, which have cost us hundreds of millions of dollars in years. And the request I'd have is, and obviously we're in a better place as a result of the negotiation and frankly the governor's intervention on Penn Station access, but just ask that if that were to slip and it became a material schedule or cost issue, that you'd bring it to the attention of obviously senior management in this committee.
Will do.
Thank you.
So looking ahead, many activities we're moving forward with. One of the key ones is the track alignments. We're working with all of the stakeholders to get their input on an optimized alignment. This is absolutely a critical component. We are also activating the pre-construction activities. We talked about issuing contractor requests for qualifications. We're moving forward with identifying the long lead items, in particular the interlockings are key there. And we're also going to continue the community engagements. As mentioned, we're going to meet with Hunts Point and Co-op City. We'd like to thank you, and we look forward to reporting on this project as we continue progress.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the committee. The IEC has one oral remark concerning the Penn Access Program, and that is that I'd like to emphasize that execution of a design phase agreement with Amtrak is critical to completing near-term design tasks, and the project team must work aggressively to secure this. And there are other third-party agreements that are required by the MOU and are required to complete the work of the program. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Mark Roach, Third Track. There we go. If I could just spend a few minutes just reintroducing the project to the board members that may be new. It's 9.8 miles in Nassau County. It's got 7 stations, 7 undergrade crossings are going to be built. I say a lot of 7s. There are 3 or 4 new parking garages to be built. It is due to be completed in construction in October of 2022. We started our construction back in October of 18. We have 4 years to do the construction, and that's the commitment that we've made to the local community. The project itself increased the capacity of the double track by adding the 3rd track by 45%. That's a huge increase. But not only that, it provides the ability for reverse commuting in the corridor, which is not possible right now. Those are 2 major benefits of the project. And as you can see by the numbers of October 2022, we're finishing at approximately the same time as East Side Access. Total project cost is at $2.58 billion, of which $538 million is in the next capital plan. That is beginning to be an issue. I'll highlight some of that issues as we go forward. $2.05 billion is currently funded, and that work is well underway. $270 million of that future funding is allocated to the design build contractor, 3rd track constructors. Our contract requires that amount be awarded before July of next year to make sure that we stay on schedule and on budget, and that I'd like to remind the board about. A couple of namings so that you're familiar as I go through this. 3rd track constructors is a consortium of 4 contractors and many designers. I won't go through their names. We use the phrase PMT, Project Management Team, that encompasses all of the agency, DOT, and all our consultants that are supporting us as we go through. She got it, she's got it. Yelena's doing it. Okay. So I'm pleased to present that we are on budget and on schedule. In fact, we are very low on change orders across the whole of the system. We have less than 1% of our allocated budget for change orders that is necessary at this present time. We are seeing some means and methods issues from 3rd track constructors that are telling us that we will need to support from Long Island Railroad with more force account or more track raising over the years ahead. So I'm saying there's $5 to $10 million for changes that are going to occur. But in general, of the $140 million in contingency that we have only allocated about 1% of that at this stage. Contractor is moving ahead. I would characterize it as aggressive. They are very detailed and very precise. They've got some very good team members. We are hoping in the next few weeks to make some changes to the contract that will help them get further ahead on the schedule. And again, I'll talk about that just in a moment. If we look at what's currently going on out there right now, I won't go through this in great detail, but I'll do a little bit of summary. There are 3 bridges that we've started this year. 1 is already complete, which is nice to say. 2 more will be complete this year. We have started work on 2 undergrade crossings. The first was at Urban. The second one, which started this morning, is at Covert, and I'm pleased to say that the traffic diversions that were planned for the closure of that road worked out extremely well today. We've started work at 2 stations, Maryland Station and Carl Place Station. We've restricted the contractor to work at only 2 stations. If we add a 3rd station, then we figure we may get to the point where we affect service, and we don't want to do that. We will watch that as we go forward. Long Island Railroad have a lot of work going on out there right now. They are raising tracks at a number of locations. They are relocating utilities in many locations. We are seeing, to keep on schedule, that using Long Island Railroad forces as they become available is actually quite an asset to the project to make sure that we're using all the resources that are available. Just a couple of photographs of progress out there right now. This was last week. This is at Covert Avenue. That closed this morning, that road, again with no traffic issues. I highlight, and I've used the word aggressive regarding 3TC, and I think this illustrates it quite well. 3rd track contractors only have 6 months to now get this road open. So this date in October, they must have that road back in place, or they will be punished with liquidated damages. Or if they finish early, we have incentivized them. And you can see in the photograph, they've got lots of rigs. They've already contained some of the traffic to start getting ahead and putting in some of the piling in ground to move forward. They are looking at all times at those LDs. They are driving their behavior, and I am very pleased to say that they are well ahead of some of these construction requirements. The second photograph is a little bit of a simple photograph. It's not sexy, if I could use that phrase. It's Long Island Railroad raising the track by 2, 3, or 4 feet in a number of locations, but it's actually extremely important. What this does by raising the track we can raise the road that goes underneath the track eventually, which means that we don't have to spread out and bring that road back up as far out into the community. So Long Island Railroad's work to raise the track as much as possible, to take advantage of the space and the geometry that we have, is saving impacts to the community, which is a very good thing to report. I like this photograph very much. This is Urban Avenue. This is 1 week after we closed the road on March 9th. 1 week, and we're already down to the level of where the new undergrade crossing is going to be. Third track constructors, and particularly the crew that's on the undergrade crossings, is extremely aggressive. Excuse me. We'll come back to this photograph a little later on, but what this shows is the bridge on the left, which is at Cherry Lane in the town of North Hempstead, is the first bridge to be replaced, lifted out and replaced, and that happens on June 1st. We have 9 double track closures coming up this year, which is extremely unusual for Long Island Railroad, and that is something that you should be well aware of. And finally, in terms of photographs, this is a view in Mineola of the parking garage that's under construction there. We have completed all of the sheet piling around the parking garage, and we've now lowered the ground down to the basement level and are starting the foundations. The rule in parking structures is that if you can get to the foundations, and when you start your reinforcement of your foundations, you've got 1 year to go. So we've got 1 year to go. So a little bit on schedule, if I could spend a little time on this. In January, when we met the last time, we were pushing third track constructors to get much more detail on their schedule. We were iterating with them, and I think at this stage we've been through 6 iterations of the schedule. I am pleased to report that we now have a very detailed, and I am very confident in the schedule that we have got. In terms of numbers, it's a 30,000 line schedule. It's very detailed. I think we have a little more to go. What's very pleasing is that all of the primary sub-consultants and subcontractors' schedule are all built into that 30,000 schedule, so it's extremely detailed. But it's telling us a number of things. And if I look at the red line that's on the screen there for a start, for example, all of those activities that are meant to happen are happening, and you've just seen photographs of those. But if you look at the right-hand side, coming down the line, which is, well, it's not shown on the scale, but there it's in 2022, there are too many activities that are near the end of the schedule. There are too many activities that are at the end of the project that it indicates to me we're putting ourselves at risk. So our task is to modify the contract, to work with our contractors, to effectively bring forward as many of those activities as we can. I take a couple of them as an example. The one at the very top, which shows the parking lots and the parking garages. There's one activity that is extended into 2022. We're working to bring that back by a year so that it won't become an issue by the time we get to the end of the project. If I look at what is effectively the grade crossing eliminations, and if I, you move very quickly, there are 2 grade crossings there, which are School Street and at Willis, which don't happen until the next phase of the project, effectively financed from the next capital program. We think that's a major risk. Given that I had an accident there, and there's been a tragedy there 3 or 4 weeks ago, we want to take advantage of the unused contingency to finance those 2 grade crossings and make them happen early. We think that is a major benefit if everybody agrees with that.
So you're saying you can, sorry to interrupt, you're saying that you can, there's no reason for that
Correct.
Elimination to wait till the end because you
Correct.
can do it earlier, and we've had multiple accidents at that School Street crossing.
Correct. Yes, there's more benefits than just
Right,
the
why
safety,
wait?
but absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
smart.
If I look at the substations, you can see that that's a rippled effect through the contract. Really, that's because most of those substations are financed from the next capital program. It would be very nice if we could advance the monies for the project so we can move some of those forward. You can see that their end date comes near the end of the project. Look, I can go through the project with this type of view in mind, and I won't go through it all, but suffice to say that our intention is to look at it in this way so that we're not just looking at the day-to-day activities, we're doing the overall bigger picture. Sir.
Are you monitoring, this is elementary, but you're monitoring all your subs, especially those that are, you're waiting for deliveries to make sure they're on time?
We're monitoring our subs, each sub at about 3 different levels. We find it insufficient to just work with the project manager on the sub.
I mean, go and visit.
Oh, that's the other aspect. We're not only going to visit, but we're also pulling in their CEOs and executives to make sure they know us personally and feel obligated to deliver the project. So we're tackling them at many levels. The critical path of the project is really the last 4 boxes on this sheet. And it's a bit of a dance, it's a bit of a ballet between retaining walls and utilities and interlockings and signals. To give us some measure of our progress, our target this year is to complete 18,000 feet of retaining wall. By completing the 18,000 feet of retaining wall, we're effectively building the land upon which to build the third track. So this year, we must finish 18,000 feet of wall or better to stay on target. That's the simple way of looking at that part of the schedule. If I could move on.
You're going to get it done, Mark?
Yes, we'll hopefully beat it.
Thank you.
So for you, a little bit of detail from the schedule, but I think you need to know these dates. On the left-hand side there, we've listed the dates of the 9 double-track closures that are planned throughout the corridor this year. 5 of them on the top left are part of the team project, and Long Island Railroad has another 4 that they plan this year, which we will piggyback a lot of work on. Normally, typically, Long Island Railroad only has 1 double track outage in any given year. To do 9 in 1 year is a little bit of a leap. It's a specific strategy that we've done to try and get the project completed on time. So just be aware that that's something new.
I just want to make clear, we do have a mitigation plan for in terms of the customer impacts, which is new. Instead of just running buses along the route, we're going to be actually connecting people to other stations, and we're going to get out in the communities, make sure people understand this is the closest branch, and the bus or van will take you there so you can take a train into the city or whatever. So it's a new strategy, and we think it is both more efficient and better for the customer.
Thank you, General. Board Member Reckler asked us at our January meeting to report on changes. We've prepared this graphic just to give you a quick visual look at it, but there are 20 changes, or de-risking changes as I prefer to call them, on the project. The blue on the chart represents the work and the time spent on the change by our project management team. The orange represents the time taken by our 3TC contracting team. As you can see where the time is being spent with the 3TC contract. We've worked with them to help advance these changes a little bit faster because they're beginning to fall behind a little bit, and they've agreed to do that. But what these are not changes to the project due to error, due to added scope. These are changes that we want to make to be flexible to make the project better. And if I could turn the sheet to give you one example of that. This is an idea that's come from third track constructors. Shown in blue stripes there is a piece of land that third track constructors have decided that they will buy and give to the railroad at the end of the project. What they've done is looked at the overall project and said, look, we're required to give you 4 or 5 facilities. Why don't we just give you them all in one location? Why don't we amalgamate all of these facilities in one location? That means we can just have one building, one space. We can triple use that space for all sorts of equipment. And it's a great idea. We've worked with Mineola. The space is appropriate. It's in between 2 tracks. It'll be never be used for anything else. It's a great idea, and it's an improvement to the project. And it's the kind of change that design build allows us to do with no consequences to us. In fact, it's a huge benefit to us to get all of our services and all of our utilities into one, all our support teams into one area. And there are lots of these types of ideas that are continuously going on in the project. Design build is giving us room and method and time to make lots of improvements to the project as we go. It is a wonderful tool.
Excuse me,
sure.
Mark, when you say to make it better, is it mean the project's going to end quicker, or these are just new ideas that are going to enhance the overall project?
I'd say it's the latter. It's enhancing the project, but at the end of the day, by having all of our crews at one location, less maintenance, less toilets to clean, whatever we need, it's actually quite a long-term and benefit for us as well.
But Mark, you should make it clear, this is associated with the expediting the 2 grade crossing eliminations, the Willis Avenue grade crossing eliminations. So you see up there that this is the same area where it crosses not only the main line but the Oyster Bay line as well.
Yeah. There's lots of improvements that are overlapping, I'll put it that way.
That will, Commissioner Law, that will save time.
Yeah. So moving on, we've presented the last time as sort of an accounting of the 600 community commitments that we've made. I haven't updated that yet, or to present to you today. I thought we had enough. But look, one of the factors that's in there is we're recognizing some of our noise levels are going slightly high. So we've worked with 3TC to build what's on the right there, which is a 60-foot noise shroud to essentially hang around all of our piling equipment to bring our noises back down to levels that we committed to. It's just another example of the change that's happening on the project. This next slide is probably one of the more complicated ones, but it's probably one of the more important. Look, we say we have a 30,000 line schedule. And that's quite an achievement, but it's not enough. If you looked at what happens on East Side Access, we have to be able to demonstrate and show and believe that we can build those 30,000 lines of schedule within 240 trains live on the track every day. That is a major driver. So what we're doing is we're digging into every single line on that schedule and preparing what's essentially called block thinking. And there's a nice circle on the diagram to show you that if we look at just one block, for example, which happens to be on the eastern end of the project, that graphic shows all of the work that happens in that block between March 4th and May 19th. If we don't get all that work done by May 19th, we may never get to that block with a weekend closure for another year. We must finish that work on May 19th, or we can't meet all these deadlines. So every 6 to 8 weeks, and this happens to be 75 days, we have a major deadline that we have to meet to actually make this work. This block thinking is fundamental to the success of the project. Again, I think this is a repeat from January. It is our own performance presented. Whatever is in red on that diagram is a problem. You won't be able to find the red, but there is some. And if I could look in the center of that circle there are little red lines on top of some of our performance. And what that's saying is that we have gone over 21 days in our response period for some submittals. As we've looked at the reasons for this, it is all associated with vendor relations. We are taking too long to approve contractors to work on this job, and we need to do something about that. We've added a new resource into the vendor relations office here at MTA. We see improvements for that, but we need to get better as we go along. It's proving an extremely useful tool, and it's flagging up all sorts of issues that we address immediately when we see them, and I would encourage this to be used in many other projects. Good neighbor incentive. Our contractor received 90% of his award for the end of 2018. We've just sent out a survey for the first quarter of this year. We're seeing that the contractor is making great strides to improve his behavior in the community. Our mayors are extremely active in making sure that the contractors know what they have to do good behaviors in the community. And I thank our mayors across the corridor for being active in this regard. This is working very, very well. Just 2 slides and final. Look, we're aware that the board and the governor are keen on transparency. We want to meet that goal. We are putting this type of report on the web and giving it to the mayors. What this actually is each element of the project, because it's very hard to understand 30,000 lines of schedule, but we're taking each element of the project, doing a little sketch like this, and showing the mayors and putting on the website, here's the dates we're going to hit over the next 3 to 4 to 6 to 8 months. So we are holding ourselves accountable publicly by putting this information out there. We are admitting when we don't hit it because we'll miss it by a date or two because some utility doesn't quite get there, but we're putting it out there so that people can see we're trying and we are being as honest as we can be. And finally, a little bit of fun if I could, and I hope this works, Elena. If you just give us a little moment. So we have started to take panoramic photographs, and we're putting these on the web as well. These are photographs that you can spin. It's like Google Earth or Google View. So you can see in there, as we're looking west, this happens to be at Cherry Lane. You can zoom into this and see that the space on the left-hand side there besides the track is where we're going to put the 3rd track. Okay, if you spin to the right, Yelena, you can see that the detail of that bridge is to be replaced. And I don't know if you can see in the distance, but could you zoom into that, Yelena? If you look in the distance, you can see trestles that are about to be built right beyond that bridge. That's where the new bridge is being built temporarily. And on June 1st, that bridge is going to be slotted into position. And that's when we need our first double track outage. Yelena, if you go to the right. So as we spin to the right, you can see the abutment. There's a gentleman down there working on some reinforcement. That is the abutment being expanded to effectively support the 3rd track. If you look to the right, you can see the concrete that is effectively being put in place, which is one of the retaining walls. That's a 500-foot retaining wall. We were a little bit concerned about our contractor being slow on the retaining walls, but his precast methodology is working extremely well, and he's putting in many units every week. Look, we put this up there, and we put it on the website for the community because it's hard to see over the wall. It's hard to really get a full view of what's happening out there. And we figure, look, if we're telling you what we're going to do, we're going to show you what we're actually doing and demonstrate that we're meeting our deadlines. Thank you.
So, Mark, good presentation. You made a comment about a fully funded 2020 capital plan and timing. Do you want to expand on that?
Sure. So we have $538 million that's hopefully going to come in the next capital plan. Of that, $270 million of that must be in place by July of next year. At that date, there's a date in the contract, there's an option in the contract to extend it for no cost or no change in cost and no change in schedule. So we can meet all these dates as long as the board and the capital plan comes through with that $270 million at that time.
So when this is finished and you have trains running on 3 tracks here, but only 2 tracks, you know, between Hicksville and Ronkonkoma, which is an improvement from the 1 track that it was for a while, where do the extra trains go? Will you send some down the central branch to Babylon, or where will they go? Some additional trains to Huntington?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, to be honest with you, in detail. I believe that's my Long Island Railroad colleagues. What I will say is that the service plan is being worked on to make sure that we have all that worked out by the time we get there. And I can come back to you at the next meeting and tell you about that. Okay.
Mohammed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mohammed Mohammedinia. I'm the independent engineer on the Long Island Railroad expansion project. We oversee the agency, and we're here to report to the board whether we agree with the agency's report or not. The IC report on the Long Island Railroad expansion begins on page 81 of your CPOC books. For schedule, the IC has reviewed the project schedule and agrees with the schedule logic. Significant increases in contractor resources are required to accomplish 2019 planned work. Some of these increases include the installation of 18,000 linear foot of retaining wall and the work associated with the crossing eliminations. In the opinion of the IEC, the agency is taking appropriate steps to mitigate risks associated with the 2019 milestones. On cost, based on the IEC's review of the project construction costs, soft costs, and remaining contingency, the IEC concurs that the project is within budget. This concludes the IEC's report on the Long Island Railroad expansion project, and I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you. In terms of commitments and completions, the summary of commitments by the MTA and its agencies appear on page 86. And to date, through March of 2019, the agencies have made 3 out of the 4 planned major commitments. On completions on page 89, the agencies have made 3 out of the 4 major completions through March as well, with 1 other completion being delayed but should be made up soon. And they plan on forecasting to meet all of their completions. That concludes the report. Chairman?
Thank you. Any questions, comments before I take a motion to adjourn? Good. Thank you for good reports. Motion to adjourn. Second. Adjourn. Thank you all.